Hi, thank you for taking the time to look at my presentation. I'm Zoyander Street. I'm a part-time PhD student at Lancaster University in the UK, and I'm an artist researcher specialising in games and interactive media. Today I wanted to talk about a project called Penance that I've been working on since 2019. Penance is an interactive documentary based on interviews with 45 transgender people around the UK. You have interactive dialogues with characters that each represent someone who I've interviewed. The reason I made Penance was to try and give other people the experience that you get when you know so many trans people. So it's not that a few trans people and they exist as an exception to what you perceive as the norm. Your sense of what the norm is has just gone because you've met enough people who live outside of it. The method of interaction is pretty standard form of interactive dialogue that you would see in a lot of role-playing games. I always give the player a binary choice between two different questions that they can ask the character. The questions are made up for the conceit of the interaction, but the answers are all verbatim, content from real interviews. The character designs are by a trans artist called June Hornby, who I reached out to because I really loved her previous work, Earth Tone. It feels like it gives life to things that are ways of being alive that are completely speculative. I intentionally work with lo-fi technology and means of realizing things because I also want there to be the sense of transparency. I want to make things that someone can imagine making themselves, because then it encourages that critical thinking about how has this thing been made and what it's doing rhetorically, and so that they can read it critically as a text. And another thing that I'm trying to do here is, instead of using interactive media to simulate that sense of being in someone's shoes, instead of it being a first-person experience of day in the life of a trans person or whatever, I want to make second-person experiences. I want to make things that put people in relationship to someone else and get them to think about what they're doing in that relationship. Penance follows on from previous projects that I did that actually started out with virtual pets. So for part of my PhD thesis, I was researching the history of virtual pets, Tamagotchi and that kind of thing. And then I decided to make some virtual pets that would live in cages in a shopping centre. There was one pet, a dog, that I'd programmed to always be kind of unhappy and grumpy. That's just a prejudice that I have about ducks. I just think they seem kind of grumpy. And I noticed that a lot of people blamed themselves. They thought they'd done something wrong to upset the duck and that their job was to try and make it better. And I was like, that's interesting, and I want people to think that way about other humans. I think I live in quite a cruel society where when another human is having a bad time, people find ways to deflect and come up with reasons why it's not their fault and they don't have to do anything about it. But then I was seeing that when people encounter this extremely lo-fi representation of a duck and the duck is unhappy, they think it's their fault. How could this be used as a documentary format? So what I'm hoping to do next is finish making all of the characters. There's still some interviews that I haven't turned into characters yet. And I've worked with a programmer, someone who's a way more experienced programmer than I am, to put in a system that makes the characters get tired. My least favourite bit of feedback is when people say that they went back and replayed the same conversation over and over again to get all the different branches and get all of the information from that character possible. I'm really glad that someone is engaging so closely with it when they do that, but it feels like I've created a means for them to simulate a form of behaviour that I don't like. Don't like it when I'm present in a space as a trans person and suddenly I have to do a lot of work educating someone and answering really emotionally difficult questions. It's really exhausting, and there's no one at the other end of that interaction who will helped me to recover the energy from having done that. So I was hearing this feedback that people had been using the characters the way that I don't like to be used. And I'm like, on the one hand, this is great because, like, I've almost made robots that can do this labor for us so that we don't have to. But it's not quite true. I don't think of them as, like, labor-saving devices. I think of them as means of simulating a relationship between people. And I don't want to simulate that kind of relationship. So I decided that what I wanted to do was have a energy mechanic so that the characters get tired the longer you talk to them. So if you want to go back and have the same conversation a different way, you might have to wait a day or two for them to recover their energy. So it's not completely preventing the user from interacting with it that way, but I just want to make there be a little bit of friction before you can go in and drain someone of every part of their story. And then once I've completed the final version of Penance with the extra characters and this feature integrated into it, I'm going to be looking for archives to keep Penance as a finished work, and also some of the people who I've interviewed have given permission for the recording or transcript to be kept in an archive after the project is done. So I'm looking for a home for that. So that's going to be part of what I'm working on later this year with Penance. So yeah, it's available online right now. It's just not in its finished form yet, but I would love it if people could go and check it out. I'd love to hear what people think about it. Yeah, and it's a real honor to be able to, like, present this at Moving Trans History Forward. So thank you so much for letting me do this.